So, um, and I usually find like the meat of the matter happens not at the beginning, but at the end. So we can just start really anywhere. But I think this is about trying to identify key points that will help people who are unfamiliar with the idea of holding intentional space. Just a resource that will help them do that. And so maybe we just want to sort of popcorn out ideas about what that looks like and feels like for us.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you nailed it with attention, giving someone your undivided attention. That's a huge part of it.
Yeah, I think also for me, I'm really trying to be very careful about what they're saying. And I have to be relaxed in the understanding that whatever I need to say during this time, it will find its space. But it actually isn't about me really trying to tell the group what's going on with me. Like there's almost a sacrifice on my part that the group isn't about me, even though I'm hosting the space. I'm hosting it for other people, so that they can say something.
Yeah.
But what I find is that usually if there's something that's inside me that needs to come out, it has space. Mm-hmm. If I really model it well for others.
Meaning modeling, showing, holding space for others so that they
holding space, yeah.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it is energetic, right? It's kind of like, yes, I might be distracted by this thing I want to say. Now, how do I let go of that and trust that that's going to come through? Because I think what's not holding space, you can almost see it and feel it in someone when they're like burning to say something and they're trying really hard to be quiet. And it's like, just say what you have to say.
Yeah.
So it's learning how to swallow that in yourself, trust that it's going to come through at some point, and allow other people to, share what they need to share, or just to say, I need to get this out of my head first, and then we can talk.
That's a really good suggestion. I think also the willingness to let space exist and not have to rush in. There's an interview technique I read about one time where the interviewer just is silent and the interviewee shares, and then they stop and the interviewer doesn't say anything and it just sits there, and the interviewee says something else, and it becomes a really revealing interview because the interviewer is willing to just be comfortable in the fact that nothing is being said. It sort of digs something up in the person being interviewed.
Totally. I mean, that's kind of a lot of the, traditional therapeutic process is just being present with someone and seeing what emerges.
Right. Yeah. Did they teach you any sort of space technique when you were?
I mean, I didn't go to like psychoanalysis school, so no. Social work school didn't really give me any clinical skills that I picked up on my own, kind of
Mhm.
just getting thrown out there. I think it's just my personality, and then you refine it over time and with supervision. But I can't say that anyone's taught me any techniques, but I think that's a big one is just like I would call that active listening and allowing. And for me it feels like energy work in a sense, developing this understanding of what's being said in between the words, feeling like really it feels very visceral sometimes, feeling what's not being said or that there's something bubbling that needs to come through. um, yeah, I think when you get quiet and you get comfortable with the space yourself, like when I was a young therapist, I was so uncomfortable with the space. I felt like I had to say something as soon as there was a pause. And learning for myself to get comfortable with that space to really allow someone to come forward, I think made me so much a better clinician. Yeah, it's like a language. It's like learning an instrument, maybe just getting to know the space yourself so that you can offer it to others.
Yeah. When I think about sort of trying to create something for people who are starting a table, or just because they're curious and they want to go in this direction, and they um, I feel like the very first lesson is you're going to be uncomfortable if you're silent,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to be really important to befriend that discomfort, um, because the group will actually benefit.
Yeah, there's nothing more anxiety provoking than someone that just is so anxious with the quiet that they can't let it be. I mean, even if you've ever taken a long road trip with someone and they just talk incessantly the whole time, you need some space. You need some, like, okay, let's just enjoy being in this moment without words. I
Yeah.
need to be in my head for a little while too.
Yeah. So what do you think, other than just experience, helps people get more comfortable with the silence?
I think recognizing what's coming up for you, recognizing
Yeah.
how your mind has such a hard time being still, noticing how you might be triggered or want to jump in, and what needs are unmet in you or unchecked that are coming through.
Yeah. And you can really feel it if you're paying attention. Like I feel it like in an embodied way, like right here above my whatever that's called, the solar plexus.
Yeah.
I really feel the anxious when I feel anxious in that situation. I can really, I've come to be able to be like, oh, look at that, because I know where it appears in my body,
Yeah.
and and I can usually just say, oh, nice to see you.
Well, that's the thing, right? It's like you're having different dialogues. So you're here with your person or your people, and then there goes the mind or there goes the body telling me, something's happening. How do I tend to myself while still being present with others?
Mm-hmm.
You know? And at what point do I need help doing that? Do I have to
Mm-hmm.
say, I want to be here with you, but I just have to be honest. I'm having some anxiety and I just need to express this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like simultaneous conversations, right?
Yeah, and it's funny. There's this warning that went on in my head as I heard you say that, which is and total projection, um, of me wondering if people would use that as an excuse to not do the intentional space holding, just to constantly be like, I gotta let this out. I gotta, and it's just,
Good
there's
point.
nothing you can do about that. It's just, um, yeah, learning to discern.
Yeah, that's a good point. Some people just naturally, well, I guess you said like introvert and extrovert, right? If somebody's an extrovert, that's probably a lot more difficult not to say it. And then how can you learn to kind of meet your needs without processing it with everyone else?
Right. And I do think that there's something about, like you just said, I think there's something about the willingness to take on a group role as also containing within it the the idea that other people's needs are going to come first. Um, not to be, not that you're there in a therapeutic role where you're just there for everybody, but somehow, because that's not the case either.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you've added a responsibility to your life, which is they're looking for some sort of boundary, and you're the boundary person.
A boundary and also a threshold, right?
Right.
Like they're looking for an opening to some spiritual exploration,
Yes.
a way to get there, and you're hopefully providing an avenue to do that.
Right. And you're kind of, they I've heard this term, and I think it's from Joseph Campbell, but I'm not entirely sure. And they call it the threshold guardians, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it might also come not from Joseph Campbell, but from some of the research that's been done on literature that has followed um, the hero's journey model.
Okay.
And they're these people that they're not exactly mentors, but they're people who stand in front of a bridge, and you have to answer a question to get across the bridge or not. And only the people who are ready for the bridge get to walk. It's not that you have to kill them, although I suppose in some sort of places you do kill them, but they're there to ensure that the threshold is only accessible for those who are ready. But what they're doing is they're keeping the threshold sacred, right? They're keeping it from the marauding barbarians who would run in and sack the temple. Yeah, you're kind of like a threshold. You're inviting people in, saying the temple is, through this tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
So that's kind of what the silence does. So, okay,
yeah.
let me generate this thought. So, if somebody's not ready for the temple and you're the threshold guardian and you're offering them this space, they're not ready for that space, they're not going to cross the bridge. They're going to run screaming.
Yeah. Well, I think part of our desire, right, is not to present an insurmountable barrier.
Yeah.
The temple isn't hard to get into. The temple it's easier to get into, though, if you respect certain group norms, like not talking over people.
Yeah. Well, that's a really good point, to have some kind of rules around that.
Well, and I think that's where the guardian role comes in,
Yeah.
right? There's somebody who sits there and says, I model the silence and I hold the space. And we allow, 5 seconds in between whenever someone stops talking before somebody else speaks, or, whatever the,
Yeah.
I think, there's part of me that wants to be very open. I don't want to define a table too closely because I think they will be so different.
Mhm.
but something like that.
Yeah. And I think it'd be helpful to have all of that written out for people to learn and understand and
Yeah.
experience. Like, I keep coming back to this idea of if we experience it in ourselves, then we can identify it in other people while keeping ourselves in check too, right? Because it's very easy to point out the rules to someone else, but sometimes we don't recognize it in ourselves.
And some people really want us to talk,
Mm.
right? Like, I wouldn't be surprised if in the group that you ran, people really wanted
Right.
you to impart the wisdom.
I've had different experiences with that. I mean, I think sometimes, like, I feel like that came up, yeah, or somebody tries to take that role, if not, right?
Somebody will try to take that role. That's actually a really good point, because I think that's also the role of kind of the threshold guardian, is to be confident in themselves enough to provide stability for the space,
Mm.
without it having to be about them. Which isn't to say that they're not in it. They're in it.
Yeah, right. But I guess your main motivation can't be. So I'm kind of thinking like something that Ken said at the event Saturday about 12 step and how you have to have gone through your own process maybe first before you can be of service to others.
Well, I think the threshold guardian has to know what's on the other side of that bridge to know what can get across or what can't get across. Right?
Yeah,
They have to have walked it.
right.
Which I think is when I think about these sort of twice monthly meetings, or however it shakes out. The idea is to really prepare the threshold guardians for doing the work, right? Like, how do you cross the bridge to come back so that you can help others cross the bridge?
Yeah.
Right? So, for example, it might be that, I do a meditation, I release it to the group, we all talk about it, we all figure out what we think about it. Then when it comes time to do the group, people have already heard the meditation, they've already talked about it with a bunch of people.
True.
So they already feel like they know, they've had some experience,
Mm-hmm.
and from multiple different perspectives on it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. But then how do you avoid not imparting all your wisdom right away, right? Because some people will be like, oh, I already figured this out, instead of letting people have their own process with it.
Correct. Yeah, spiritual maturity of being able to be comfortable with the silence. And maybe they won't get it. Or maybe that call, the table isn't as eye-opening as the call was, because of the nature of the people who are at the table versus the nature of the people who are on the call. Or maybe it's more eye-opening
Right.
because it's more intimate. It's like you're in person. There's no real time limit on it. There's, or the time limit is different. Um, yeah, then it comes back to just being okay with the silence, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, and I think so much of this is just going to be, I mean, so this is what are we calling this? A spiritual direction, like,
Companioning is what I'm calling it.
okay. So it's going to be about going through your own process of learning how to be a companion by first having companionship with your own home-based group, and then bringing that out to others at the table.
Yeah, I mean, I really believe that the spiritual experience, you have access to it when you are on your own and you do stuff on your own, but we're really not on our own.
Yeah.
Even when we're on our cushion, the stuff that I sort of meditate on and think about when I'm on my cushion, that all comes from an interaction that I had with other people.
Yeah.
And when I'm really in the zone, it 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 very often is with other people. Like I never cry on my own, but
Right.
I cry at services.
Mm.
Why is that? There's something about the dynamic of others that creates something larger.
So that could be part of the motivation for holding space, right? When somebody's getting anxious with the silence, maybe the motivation is I'm here not to talk, but to experience this moment with others and let something stir in me in a, at a depth that I don't usually get access to.
Yeah, I really believe. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, that's it.
Oh,
Yeah.
I really believe in that Martin Luther King quote. I don't know if you guys still say it at Original Blessing, but you know, the whole point of Original Blessing was like, I cannot become on my own. I become when the becoming the becoming that is coming is a we.
Yeah.
So these tables are trying to engender the we that is becoming. The evolution of humanity is not many individuals, but the finding of the singular consciousness as part of this larger life. So we're bringing in the we, which can easily get stomped out by someone who overtalks or uh, doesn't leave oxygen for others.
I like that as a tagline: leave oxygen for others.
I think that's how it feels sometimes,
Yeah.
right?
Need someone's awareness of that though, because that's really challenging. You don't want to suppress somebody when they're trying to, I mean, just in general, right? Not even just table setters, but you don't want to suppress someone. But some people just don't have a sense of like, okay, we only have 10 minutes and you're speaking for 8 of them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think some of that comes with when you lay the ground rules. And one of the things when I used to do the lay ministry is we created this covenant. And one of the things I always put in there was make sure you understand how much you're talking. And then everybody around the circle read the covenant. So each line was read by somebody else. And so it never came as like rules on high.
Yeah.
And then there was always the opportunity to change the covenant if somebody was like, I really don't like this, or I want to add this. We could put it to the group to see if the group wanted it to be added.
I like that.
But somehow sort of adding that, I really believe that saying something in a way brings it into being.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't necessarily mean just because you say something, you become that. But I mean, because people say shit they don't do all the time. But in that case, I think it helped.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just the reminder, especially if you're always opening that way with that covenant.
And I think on occasion I've had to talk to some people And that also is a skill, which is, well, actually, Ken called you, whether I did it skillfully or not. I was like, hey, let's hear from some other people. Because that Ken was really anxious
Yeah.
on that call and was talking a lot.
Right. Right.
Which is fun. It happens to all of us.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing that's challenging about groups when everybody feels like they need so much space, and it's because they're excited and they want to share. And how do you not burst their bubble and still invite others in?
And I'm just saying this off the top of my head, so I have no idea.
Yeah.
But I wonder if there's a way to implement that, the value of the we. So that, the thing that is being created, that the highest ethic is not the individual, which is, very countercultural in a way,
Mm-hmm.
but the health of the group. And what does it mean to just sit in that?
It's really challenging, and we all have different needs at different times. And I think a basic understanding has to be this is not your personal therapy hour. Please make your own space and journal about this, talk to somebody about it, take it, take a walk with it. Don't only use it here, use it somewhere else. It can't just be at the table when we're all here. You have to have your personal responsibility to take care of the process and then come back.
Right. And I think, some of what I will try to offer along the way is a place for people to sort of check in and share over the course of the month, so that they can, if something big is happening for them, they can add it somewhere, talk about it somewhere.
Yeah.
So that they don't feel like they have a month worth of experiences that they've got to share before, they got to get out in one.
Some kind of a forum, I think, where people can journal, like have some, like a live journal. I like that idea, just so there feels like there's space there too. It's like, oh, I can't hold this, and maybe it's a reflection on what happened at the group or just a personal experience with the content. um, that, and then maybe even a section for sharing, like, well, how much did I talk today and how much did I listen? What did I learn from listening? Maybe a reflection question.
Oh, wow. That would be so amazing, actually.
Which part?
What did I learn from listening? Because I think once you know that question is coming, it 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 it's with you.
Yeah.
You
And
have you
takes the focus off you. Now it's back.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. What did I learn from listening?
Mhm.
Because honestly, that could be very broad, because you could say, well, when I was listening, something came up in my heart.
Mhm.
I saw something new in this listening thing that was really, doesn't necessarily mean that you heard it in another person's mouth, uh, but it shifts everything towards the listening. Oh, I think that's a very good question.
Yeah. And maybe even some exercises like, well, how do I learn to listen in new ways? Because I think a lot of us don't know how to listen in general. We're not taught. We're taught we have to talk, fill space. Sometimes we do it to hide. Sometimes it's just our personality. But like exercises in listening, um, yeah, as part of like this experience. So not just meditation, right? Meditation makes people anxious.
It does. it is a training piece that I think is helpful. Like people get anxious because they're not used to it. So I think it's like a muscle. That's the way I think of meditation. Is often in the beginning people are like, oh, but if a space is held well, people can go for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right, it's different than that.
And when you just said that, just to draw on that, when a space is held well, you mean in a meditation? What is
Mm-hmm.
that? What does that mean?
For me, it means that the person who's leading the group is sitting with presence. So for me, that whenever I'm holding it, I am always very conscious of my posture, that even though I'm sitting still, it's dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my shoulders are back, it's almost like there's a thread coming up through my spine, and I'm actively in it.
Mm-hmm.
And this doesn't happen,
Right.
or this doesn't happen. Like if an itch comes, I sit there and I say, oh, that's an itch.
Yeah.
That's my mind trying to get me to move.
Yeah.
And I know that itch will pass, and then I watch and the itch goes away.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, oh, that's so interesting. I would have scratched that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, the other place I've really been loving listening is, we do chanting here,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not in English. It's actually not in, some of them are not in a spoken language. One of them's in this sort of Sino-Korean thing that just is, very old Buddhist chant.
Cool.
Yeah, so people don't speak it, right? And so it's just sounds. Like,
Right.
and but what is so amazing for me this year, I used to hate it the last time I lived here, because I'm like, why am I chanting something I don't know the words to? But now I hear the whole world in the chant. I hear it when voices drop out. I hear when voices are confused about what's coming up next. I hear when people get it wrong. I hear when people get it wrong and they try to drag the whole chant into the wrong direction.
Ah.
I hear when people are really clear and strong and they can actually carry the whole room with them, even the people who are less confident. And it actually is this little microcosm for what's in the world,
Beautiful.
because people are like that in the world.
Totally.
And so it was something I was I'm just riffing off of your listening comment, but we're going to be producing this music,
Right.
and there will be a listening, not just in the singing. I mean, not just, we aren't just actively singing, but we're also listening in the singing space. Right? Like,
I didn't hear what you just said. You just froze for a second.
oh,
Not just
we're,
singing.
we're listening in the singing space as well.
Yeah.
Because like, as we're singing together, we can hear what's going on around. And that's one of the benefits of singing this, at least one same song over and over again. Because you can learn it and you can hear the confidence or the lack of confidence in it. Anyways, that's my whole world is this chanting now. It's like I've been
I know. It's so beautiful though. Oh wow. That's great.
well, it's and it's one of those things. When I saw that little video of the kirtan, I really believe in devotional music,
Yeah.
much more than preaching, honestly.
Mm.
I just happen to be someone who doesn't have a very good voice, so I ended up being a preacher instead of but anyways, that's a little bit of a tangent, but there's listening there as well.
Yeah. Mm.
What did I learn from the listening? I think something else I've learned is that sometimes there isn't a clear question. Which direction should this conversation go? And I just have had to sit with sometimes like not saying anything until the question appears. Oh, internet is unstable. You still there? I'm back. Can you
Oh,
see
there.
me?
Okay. I don't know if I hear you say something.
I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
I hope that the recording saved.
I don't know, but you were about to say something profound and it just totally froze.
Oh, I don't know how profound it was, but it was like, are you still there? Oh, now you're frozen. Oh, now you're back. Weird. My internet seems to be okay, but it crashed on my end. So I definitely, one of these things about living in a temple with a lot of people is sometimes people are watching YouTube or whatever.
Yeah, right.
But it seems to be okay right now. So hopefully it's saved. It seems like I'm still recording. I don't know. We'll find out.
Yeah.
I remember this story that was always very inspiring to me about the sort of early Puritan preachers.
Mhm.
And you may have heard me share the story before because one of my favorites. They'd be preaching and then they'd just stop. And they would just sit there and wait, because what had happened was the Holy Spirit had left them. And the congregation would also just sit there and wait because they knew what had happened. Like the Holy Spirit had just left, and the Holy Spirit will come back. The preacher just needs to sit and wait for it to come back. And then the Holy Spirit will come back and the guy would start preaching again.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah. And everybody was like, oh, right, this isn't about him preaching. It's about him channeling.
Yeah.
And the anxiousness, I think, that comes up for some of us is, how do I sort of muscle my way through this space? And we don't have to do that. We just have to wait,
Yeah.
because the Holy Spirit will come. And I think this is a lot of what the ethic of the Quakers really. Oh, that might be an interesting thing for me to look up, is how the Quakers talk about the space.
Yeah, and Ken's into the Quakers, so he could learn from that too.
Yeah. Ken is into everything, man. He's like, I love God.
Aw, yeah,
He's so earnest.
totally,
How did
totally.
how did your call with him go, by the way?
Oh, it was very brief. We ended up connecting when he was at the airport, so it wasn't really in depth. But we're gonna have an actual conversation at some point because it's still on his mind. So I didn't feel like we really were able to get into it. He just sort of gave me the synopsis, that he was concerned that he wasn't going to be able to do this, and he didn't realize that this was an issue for him. And I was like, Ken, it's not an issue. Like we'll
Not an
just
issue.
talk about it. We'll figure it out. I think it's great he's thinking about it though. But yeah,
Well, I think
he's
it's kind of like,
no.
but
I think in general he's very masculine, that he wants to like have his head wrapped around it and control and predict. It's about the feminine, right? It's about sitting back and letting the Holy Spirit come.
yeah. It's interesting. I hadn't thought of it as masculine and feminine, but I'll sit with that.
Yeah, the space to receive the message, to hear, I think, to listen, to learn. I think that's very feminine.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense to me. And I think the sort of the will for control also, just as the way we're raised as men.
We're all raised that way too. The Western world, we're very masculine in our
Mm,
but yeah, I hear what you're saying.
yeah.
Yeah, because what's coming up in that space when you're having silence? Like, is there a fear of someone's judging me? Oh my gosh, maybe I should be in control. I should say something. They're looking at me for what's wrong with you? Why aren't you talking? Right? Like, I don't
Right. And the group itself will feel anxiety.
know.
And this is one thing I really learned about churches, right? Is that the whole church is within every single person.
Yeah. Mm.
But certain qualities of the church show up in different personalities. And so the anxiety that the church has will come out in one person or two or three people. And the wisdom of the church will come out in one, two, or three people. And it shows up in different places, right? The anxiety for change shows up here, and the anxiety for money shows up here, and the anxiety for, the public role shows up here.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah, but every one of us has the whole thing in it.
Yeah.
Um, but it's given voice through different people. And what we say is, oh, that person is anxious, or that person is a, shithead. we, but really they're expressing something that's in the system.
And that's really beautiful. You should write a piece on that. I love that resonates so deeply.
So when someone is anxious in the group, well, sometimes when you're leading a group, you can feel all of the anxiety coming in through you. And so you want to let the anxiety out. So you start speaking.
Mm.
But sometimes it's better to let the anxiety just sit there. So people have to be like, what is this?
Mm.
Like, don't relieve people of their anxiety too quickly, because then you're doing their work.
True. Yeah, that's a good point. Don't do other people's work.
Don't do other people's work.
And that can be the issue with holding space, because sometimes you want to jump in and fix it and like, but I know, and you don't get it, and let me convince you. And no, allow the person to do their work. And that takes time, and it's their own process, and there's so many variables.
Completely. Yeah, we're not there to fix people. We're there as companions.
I think that's a good thing to make sure we talk about. We're not there to fix people. No. I mean, the seeker's table is about an exploration. It's not about fixing or healing necessarily. It's wherever you are, you're on a journey, and how can we journey some of that with you and share our lessons and experiences together?
And I feel like I'm going to journey more if I have, a band of travelers.
Yeah. It's like the rest stop along the way where you kind of come together, and then you go back on your journey, and maybe I'll see you at the next rest stop,
Yeah.
Fueling station.
And I've thought about these people that walk the Campestino,
Yeah.
You're walking on your own, but sometimes it's nice to have someone next to you, not because they're taking up, they're chatting, but because you'll make it.
Yeah. Like that analogy. In life in general, right?
Right. What we're trying to do is keep companions so that, because it's hard to do the journey. The world is so noisy.
Yeah.
So we're just here to help people stay on their journey.
Yeah.
So I see it's 2:00 and I want to respect your time. This has been awesome. So
Yeah.
I will type this up and, sort of edit it and send it out, and feel free to be like, that's not what we said.
You got that all wrong. You weren't really listening.
Fucked it up, man. But yeah.
Okay.
Now, one thing that, just briefly, one thing that a lot of people weren't able to make the call.
Yeah.
And there was this part of me that's like, okay, we're moving into a more, like, we're shifting zones from like, okay, we were just doing this casual conversation to now a more codified situation, and which seems like it's probably either two different calls, like a one side of the world call and this side of the world call.
Yeah.
But probably an evening call for North America. Now, you have clients into the evening.
Well, I can make it work. I mean, let's see where it goes. Let's see.
Yeah,
I'll be honest with you. Like, I have some anxiety about taking on another responsibility.
totally.
Because I was really into like helping you brainstorm and put this out there. And now it's like, oh wait, now I'm taking on a table, and that feels a little like I'm not sure that's what I signed up for. But at the same time, I wanna, I don't know if I'm like able to do a monthly commitment. I
Yeah.
want to be part of it, but then it's like that takes a lot of energy, like we were just saying,
Yeah.
even if it's just once a month comes quickly.
Well, it's actually not even once a month, right? It's more than that, because it would be two online calls,
Right.
and then once a month. It's kind of,
I would love to be a part of. It's the table that I think I have the anxiety with, because then it's planning and coordinating and scheduling and people. It's like a whole other realm.
Yeah. My guess is you could offload that onto Ken, because I think he wants to do it.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe we'll work it out. But yeah. But in terms of the scheduling, I think doodle and see what people can make, and I'll do my best to fit it in. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that the sort of the commitment level has changed, because we just started with this chat in the morning and then went to noon, and now it's like, okay, what are we doing? And I want to make sure people know that it's not, there's no obligations.
But at the same time, we need a certain commitment level. And that's, I think, what maybe people are struggling with. Like, just even in terms of the meetings, like my schedule changes week to week. So sometimes
Oh, you froze. You froze. Oh,
okay.
there you are. Your schedule changes from week to week, is what you said.
Yeah, sort of random. But anyway, I think doodle it, and I'll put it on the calendar, and let's see where it takes us.
Yeah, and it may be, when I was starting Original Blessing, this is one of the things that happened is, like, there were people who were there who start, and then what actually happens is new people come in. Like you actually weren't part of the first group.
Right.
You may not have even known anybody in the first group.
No, I hear names all the time. Like, nope, never met them.
Yeah. I think Amy was probably the only one that you would have met in that first group.
Right. Yeah.
Which is, none of the people who actually became Original Blessing were
so interesting, right?
Yeah, because actually they were all more interested in the idea. And then, Lou was there. from right. But Lou and I had been together for years because he was with
Yeah.
me at the other church.
Right.
So yeah, everybody else
Yeah.
totally different. So, anyways, we'll just try and see what happens.
Yeah. All right, Ian. It's a journey.
Yeah, it's a journey.
All
Talk to you soon. Thank you
right.
so much.
See you soon. Bye.